Oh, sorry, time to come back to the real world. I have been asked so many questions about the metaverse over the last number of keynotes. Everyone wants to know what's the implications for consumers from a customer experience point of view. Should we be getting involved? What would it look like? And obviously it's really early days to understand what the metaverse will develop into, but I thought I'd make a short video today about what the metaverse is from a consumer perspective and how ready consumers are for that experience. And the short answer is very ready. I mean, I think it's better to look not at what the metaverse is or isn't in terms of technology, but to think about what we're trying to achieve, which is basically connection, connecting humans to technology. And if you look at the journey that we've taken from a interaction, kind of the history of humans interacting with tech, it's interesting. So we start with physically plugging wires in and out of a computer in order to program that computer. So that was what computer programming was. It was like that telephone exchange. So you're literally plugging ports in and out of each other to make the computer action something. And then that developed eventually into the punch card system, and the punch card system was genius when it was invented. The idea that you could just put a punch card into a computer and then the computer would know what action to take. So the technology interface became more intuitive, and so in terms of the knowledge required when you were plugging stuff in, you needed to know what you were doing. When you're feeding a punch card in, you didn't. And so now you can actually make a computer do something with a simple command. And that, of course, then in the 60s became programming. So then we had kind of the keyboard became the primary interface between me, the user, and the computer. And we had BASIC as a programming language, then with MS-DOS. And so now you could tell a computer what to do. But of course you had to have some knowledge, you had to understand programming. And it really wasn't, I think, until the graphic user interface where I suppose primarily Windows and Bill Gates gave us this idea, you could just click on something. You could double click, you could right click. Now you were just pressing an image and something was happening. So this really opened the floodgates for home computing ownership and for the average person to be able to interface with a piece of technology. And then of course that graphical user interface got even better when Steve Jobs said, well, why are we double clicking and moving windows? Why don't we just use this? And so then the tablet and the smartphone, as each move happens, we can see that there's more and more users, more and more natural, intuitive ways to interact with technology. And of course Jeff Bezos then gave us Alexa and Google Home, and now we just use our voice to command. And so as things get easier, we have a higher number of users, and we have kind of an obvious e-commerce chart too taking off. The easier it gets to interact digitally, of course, the more we can use technology to sell and to have positive customer experiences. So, how does the metaverse, what's the next step for us as humans? Well, obviously we are going down the road of a 3D virtual environment. And I want to talk about what the metaverse will mean for customer experience. And to do that, I suppose, if you look at Zuckerberg's recent address in terms of saying, this is the future, and does anyone else, by the way, think that his avatar in the metaverse seems to look even more human than him himself? That's slightly worrying. But so what does the metaverse mean? And what is the next stop on this customer experience journey for us? So I'm going to talk you through kind of 4 aspects that I think the metaverse is and what that means for customer experience. And the first one is spatial environments. So the spatial relationship, the 3D relationship we will have in the metaverse, whereas today we only have really a 2D one. And so again, going back to the history of technical interaction, if I think about how I grew up in the 80s with technology and gaming, this was what I would have used, a joystick. And a joystick has kind of 5 inputs, up, down, left, right, and fire. And that was it, 5. Whereas today, where is it? My kids use this. My kids will use a PS4 controller. There's 20 different buttons and directions you can use with that controller. So when I play Call of Duty or Minecraft or anything with my kids, I lose badly because their motor skills are simply better using that device than mine were using that. And in fact, I even bought a retro system to try and beat them, and they still kick my ass. So what's really interesting is if you give this to my father, if you gave that to my father, he would not be able to use it at all because he is early 80s. He grew up in a kind of a typewriter world. And while he did try and adapt to desktops, it was very interesting. My parents now, in their late 70s, early 80s, use a tablet and a smartphone every day, but they had a desktop for 20 years, but they rarely used it because that graphic user interface was difficult for them. When we gave them something easier, it became easier. Now, staying with the gaming analogy, if you give my father in his early 80s a Wii controller and ask him to wave it about playing virtual tennis, he can do that. He can do that easily because he understands what that means in the spatial world. We live in a 3D world, whereas the PS controller is more difficult. And so what the metaverse will give us is will give consumers the ability to live in a 3D world that we all understand. And I think we will look at what the pandemic gave us. It gave us, doing Zooms, MS Teams. We look back at those interactions in many years and think, how simple. Because it is actually quite two-dimensional still. It's a bit like, if you look at the Fortnite game, Fortnite is a 3D spatial game. You, the player, are in the environment and you move through it spatially. Compare that to Pac-Man. Pac-Man is a 2D game, and it was simple and it was fun of its times, but it's no Fortnite. So if you think about the internet currently is Pac-Man, and the metaverse will be Fortnite. We'll be living in a 3D spatial world, able to move around in this world, and it becomes just so much more intuitive to us because it is spatial and interrelationship. And that's how, from a customer experience point of view and a consumer values point of view, it's going to be far more useful to the average consumer than even the 2D touch poke world we live in today. That's number one. The second one is the game engine software that's driving all of this. So the internet was developed by web developers, whereas the metaverse has been developed by game developers, and there's a huge difference. So everything that we're going to see is coming from game engine software. And let me give you an example of what that might mean. Let's say you're a facilities manager in an airport. What you will do is you will build a digital twin. It's called a digital selfie or a digital copy. You build a digital version of the airport, and you can swivel that, and you can actually walk through it yourself, looking at all the various aspects. So what you do is you mirror the real world digitally. And of course, as graphics get better and better in the gaming engines, will we even know the difference between the real world and the digital world? Will we copy everything? Will there be like a Google Street View digital version of the whole world that you step into, and actually you start to ask yourself the question, is this the real world or is this the digital world? And that is the place that we're going to work in. So it's not going to be a internet developed by programmers, it's spaces developed by game developers. And so we can interact very much with the stores of the future. Will be more intuitive, will be more game based. And that brings us on to, of course, the third one, which is the main piece of the metaverse, which is the virtual environments. So we are going to, again, if the internet is a network of computers, the metaverse is a network of virtual environments. Now, we already live inside virtual environments. You can argue that Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, they're all virtual environments that we spend our time in. They're two-dimensional ones, but they are places where we have a self-identity. We project that self-identity in Instagram, and we have friends and social connection. That's a virtual environment. Whereas the new virtual environments, of course, are all going to be three-dimensional, as I said, and therefore they're much more let me put it this way. Virtual environments aren't anything new. In 2003, we had Second Life, which again, if you're a Gen Xer or maybe an early millennial, you'll remember Second Life. It still exists, but it wasn't a game. It was just a virtual environment where you could be whoever you wanted to be, create an avatar, have hobbies, meet people. People even met and got married inside the Second Life, either virtual weddings or actually met in real life and had real relationships afterwards. So are we going to live a life where we're going to step outside of our physical world and live more and more inside these digital realities? Yes, we are. What does that mean? I mean, we're already doing this with things like Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go brought augmented reality to life for everybody. I mean, look at this video. These are people in New York, in Central Park, chasing a character that suddenly popped up. So is this real world or is this digital world? Well, it's a collision of both, because these people are chasing this augmented reality creature that doesn't even exist in the real world, but yet they are behaving weirdly in the real world. And so this is the future when we kind of start to blend the physical and the digital. And then if you think about this in terms of a customer experience point of view, what will the future of virtual environments look like? So this one from Fnatic, if you have a look at this video.
Let's do it. So this was Fnatic. Fnatic's, they're an esports team. They actually have some upcoming events in here, I think, next week. But so what's super cool in here, you can like watch the videos up there, but then we've built out really kind of the future of commerce as we think of it. And so on here, you can buy, to support Fnatic, you can purchase their virtual merchandise. So you can see like all these different like clothing, like these are different t-shirt layouts. And if you're up here, if you stand next to me, you can click on one of these buy buttons, and there's like buy male or female. So if you say, okay, I'm going to hover over the male.
So you can see there, as the person is being brought on the tour, the audio comes up, comes down as the person touring you leaves and comes towards you. So it's a very real world environment. And remember, this is just version 1. We're only at 1.0 of what these virtual worlds and environments will look like. So this is going to be a really, really exciting. You're only limited by your imagination, basically, in terms of consumer interaction and customer experience with these new environments. And so will the bulk of e-commerce that we know today, very two-dimensional, very click buy, become much much more experiential. And then, of course, the limits are endless, as I said, for customer experience. And the last one I want to talk about is the non-fungible tokens, NFTs and crypto. And I think most people's head hurts when you hear NFTs. I mean, firstly, fungible. Fungible is just a really complicated, weird legal word from the Latin of fungi, meaning to perform, to exchange. So something that is exchangeable is fungible. And so if I take a 10 euro note, I can get 10 1 euro coins for that 10 euro note, so it makes it exchangeable. Whereas an NFT, a non-fungible token, is something that is unique. And this is in the digital world, like musicians have really struggled with the download streaming kind of pivot of their industry, and now they're trying to push out NFT product, where basically maybe you buy an album that's uniquely and only yours, and then maybe it's got an extra track and no one else has it, or maybe there's concert tickets attached to it, and so they're trying to build scarcity back into the system. Art, obviously NFT is huge in the art world, and actually Miss Selfridges in London recently launched a collaboration with Paco Rabanne, an artist, launching NFT dresses. So there's you can buy some of the physical dresses, but also the dresses come with a digital copy. Some of the dresses are digital only, that you can only wear inside a virtual environment. And is this the future? Buying digital clothes? Now remember the Fortnite game I mentioned earlier, many teens and kids and adults already buy skins for their character to wear inside the Fortnite game to make them more unique. And they buy those at real world currency to give themselves a sense of identity in the virtual environment. So we're already selling digital apparel. We have a whole generation of kids who are already used to buying digital apparel. So the more time you spend in the metaverse, you will of course want to buy digital products to make yourself more unique. And so it's a really, really interesting space. So those four things kind of, to me, are what the universe is about. It's about a spatial 3D world built on game engine software in virtual environments funded by NFTs and crypto. And basically, you can get caught up in the technology, the VR, the AR, what does it all mean? What it ultimately simply means is a more intuitive way for a consumer to interact with a brand. So if you are a brand in a business, do you wait until the metaverse has a certain shape to get involved? Well, yeah, you probably do to understand how to get involved. Will you have to get involved? Absolutely. And it's basically a more intuitive, user-friendly way to interact with consumers, to build really amazing customer experiences in the digital world. Because the problem with digital is it can be quite transactional and not relationship-driven, whereas the metaverse will give us an ability to really build customer lifetime value and have brand experiences inside the digital world as we start to live more and more of our lives inside that bubble. It's going to be an exciting time. In the meantime, I'm heading back in to see what's happening in my second life. Until next time, I'm Ken Hughes. Ooh, hello.